This third video, looking at structuring and designing effective presentations, focuses on presentation design. So those design decisions that you make that affect the whole presentation. The decisions you make about your presentation design can make your presentation easier to understand and make your arguments more persuasive. Your presentation design needs three things. First, simplicity. You want the audience to be fully focused on the point you're making and the evidence you're providing, and not be distracted by additional elements that are there to just make it look nice or to liven up potentially boring content. Next, consistency. Having an overall coherence will make it appear more professional, and more professional looking presentations are more likely to be considered reliable and therefore be more persuasive. Finally, your design should be unnoticed. As with simplicity, you want the audience to focus on your content and not be noticing things like the colour scheme and fonts. So first, to look at avoiding distractions. Generally, people really hate us for the next slide, but PowerPoint themes should be avoided. I know for most of you, choosing your theme is often the first thing you do when you start to create a presentation. But there are some really compelling reasons why they should be avoided. First, some of them are absolutely awful, with so many additional design elements taking up such a lot of space that they get in the way of your content, which you try to squeeze into the remaining slide space. They're often badly designed too, like the ones at the bottom right here that use all capitals for their title fonts, something that we know people with dyslexia and other visual impairments can find harder to read. Finally, the few that are reasonably designed and are not too distracting are overused, meaning your presentation just looks like many others, something you want to avoid when you're being assessed or are presenting at a conference or are giving a presentation as part of a job interview. Instead, backgrounds should be plain, so a solid colour, a simple gradient or a very simple texture. Solid colours make good backgrounds. You can use light colours or dark colours, but try to avoid ones in between, as they won't give you enough contrast between them and the text colour. Gradients can be good as long as they're simple and don't use too many colours, or there isn't too much contrast between the darker and lighter elements within the gradient. Again, this is to ensure maximum contrast between text and background. White or black text will usually give you the best contrast. Some textures can work well, such as the simple one shown here, but again use restraint, as too great a texture can make your text hard to read. Don't be tempted to ornament them with other graphics either. If you do, you're just making the same mistakes as the themes do. I've added this little box at the bottom to just emphasise that when you use coloured rather than black or white text, you should only really do that on a white or black background. It's when you have coloured text on a coloured background that most problems with contrast arise. You can have one or two words in colour for emphasis, but avoid it for the majority of the text and make sure your emphasised text is just as readable too. The next important presentation design rule is to be consistent. This is crucial to making your presentation have that overall coherence that makes it look more professional, especially now that you're not using PowerPoint themes. First, think about your fonts. Don't use more than two, one for the title and main text and one to add emphasis if you need it. There are quite a lot to choose from that work well. I particularly like the fonts like Arial Nova, Seago UI and even the new default font of Aptos, as they come in different weights, including light and semi-bold, meaning you can add varying amounts of emphasis. If you want to really emphasise some text in the main body of the slide, then use a font that is notably different from your main font. Some handwritten styles like Seago Print or Ink Free, as I've shown here, can work really well. The main thing to avoid is bad fonts, so avoid Comic Sans. Even though it's an easy to read informal font, it's got such a bad reputation that it needs avoiding for academic work. It should only really be used if you're giving a presentation to primary age children. Also avoid anything that's hard to read or quirky for the sake of it. So script fonts or anything with a comic value like the chiller one used here really don't work. Finally, Some fonts are only available in all capitals, and I've already said that you should avoid text in these for accessibility reasons, so avoid using those as well. As a general rule, use a minimum of 24 points, but note that font size is not always directly correlated to perceived text size. Apart from the heading on this slide, all the text is the same size, 26 point, and yet see how much variation there is between the sizes of what you're looking at here. Now that you're not using a theme, you need to set the font for the whole presentation in one go, so that you're not having to change it slide by slide or box by box. To do this, go to the design ribbon, avoid the themes over to the left and go to the variants section on the right. Use this drop down to see more options and you can choose fonts. You can then either select from this list and that will set it for the heading and body text, or you can go right to the bottom and customize fonts, and that will give you a wider variety of font choices, and it gives you the ability to set different fonts for your heading and body if you wish. If you name the selection, it will appear at the top of the list of fonts when you start new presentations too. Next, think about your overall colour palette and make sure you keep it limited too. As you can see from this example, it can still be quite colourful, but keeping to a limited number of colours gives it that consistency even with the different slide designs. Again, themes usually set your colours, so you need a way of helping you simplify this without them. Again, you can select a colour palette on the design ribbon. Go to the same drop down next to variants and this time select colours. You're shown a selection of pre-created colour palettes. You can choose one of these. And again, there's at the bottom of the list, you do have the option to customise colours and name your own palettes so you can use them over and again if you wish. When you select a colour palette, nothing will immediately appear to happen. But whenever you go to choose a new colour for anything, be that text colour, box colour, line colour, background colour, instead of seeing the default colours like this, you'll see the ones from your chosen palette. Stick with the theme colours and avoid the standard colours, and it will keep to that limited number. And finally, remember what I said about good design being rarely noticed? Well, here's a really good example. If you were presented with the slide on the left, you probably wouldn't even think about what it looks like. The design is so simple and clear that you just focus on what it says and what it depicts. However, noticing the content at all in the slide on the right is almost impossible. The design makes the text virtually impossible to read. The contrast makes things worse, and both of these have been set by the presentation design. The horrible issues with the alignment comes down to slide design, and that's going to be covered in the next video. So to summarise, get rid of distractions, so ditch those themes. Keep things as consistent as possible, that's mostly about fonts and colours, and don't let the design dominate. Ensure the content is noted instead. If you simplify everything, it really helps your audience to focus on that content, and that professional, coherent design will make your arguments more persuasive. The next video will look at the design of individual slides.